Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jonda Buck, and I have the opportunity and privilege of serving with the Motherless Daughters Ministry. If you're unfamiliar with our ministry, I would love for you to check out our website to see how our services and our program offerings may be of value to you or someone that you know. I do want to take a moment here and say happy 4th of July. And for all of those who have so selflessly served our country, I truly appreciate you, and I appreciate your service and dedication to our country. For the next several weeks, I'm going to be talking about emotional intelligence. And this is a topic that I absolutely love. I think it's incredibly fascinating, and it's something that we can continue to develop. If you're not familiar with emotional intelligence, our emotional intelligence is the core component of how we make our relationships effective, and more so how we make ourselves effective, how we respond to different situations. And as I was preparing for this and looking at what does emotional intelligence have to do with grief or loss, there's actually quite a bit of research out there that indicates that great levels of emotional intelligence can help us significantly not only walk through our journey, but it can help us be able to manage that more effectively than maybe what we are managing it currently. If we think about emotional intelligence, we do the rational thinking in the front part of our brain, so right here. And all of our information comes in through the base of our neck, and it goes through what's called the limbic system. And at the base of this limbic system is this little doodad, that's my medical term for you, this little doodad called the amygdala. And the amygdala is what tells us whenever we receive information, and if it's unpleasant information, the amygdala tells us whether we're going to flee in that moment, we're not going to deal with it, or maybe we freeze, we don't know what to do with it, or maybe we're going to fight. And, we're going to fight back about whatever it is that we've received. So if we think about our limbic system, it's positioned somewhere around here, and we do this rational thinking over here, we can actually create this little highway over to the front part of our brain so that we can begin to think rationally. Because I'm guessing if you're like me, we've all had those moments where maybe we're faced with something and we have various responses to it, depending upon how it triggers us. Whether we freeze, we don't know what to do, whether we fight back, maybe whether we, maybe get a little bit mouthy and we know that we shouldn't, or maybe we run away. And then my guess is, again, if you're like me, we run away and we think of all the 101 things that we probably should have said in that moment. And my guess is still none of them are rational thinking. So emotional intelligence helps us be able to process through that in the moment so that we can think and process rationally. And ultimately, it will have an impact on our relationships. Now, if you're thinking, I'm not really sure how this applies to me, trust me, if you hang with me for the next 3 weeks, I promise you will see how great levels of emotional intelligence have a tremendous impact and bearing on your relationships. There are 4 components of emotional intelligence, and we're going to talk about the first one today. The first one is self-awareness. And self-awareness is this tremendous ability to truly know yourself. Now, if you're hearing that, you're probably thinking, well, of course I know myself. But what I really want you to think about is, to what depth do you know yourself? Are you aware of your emotional patterns? Do you have the ability to control your emotional patterns? When you receive an information, do you process it, or do you respond in the moment, again, in that fight, flight, or freeze manner? Self-awareness also is really where our self-confidence resides. And I'm guessing if you're like me, you probably know the person who maybe has a little bit of an inflated self-confidence. You know the person who it's balanced, which is where we should strive to be. And then you probably also know the person who has very little self-confidence. And maybe they'll even tell you, I don't have self-confidence. I don't have confidence in my ability to be able to do whatever it is. So self-confidence is a core component of our ability to be self-aware. It's also about awareness of our emotions. You know, when you are in a situation, are you paying close attention to what your emotions are? Are your emotions influencing and driving your behavior? And my guess is if you're in that fight, flight, or freeze, you're probably allowing your emotions to dictate how you respond in those given situations. Something that we talk about a lot in the ministry, and we focus on it from the standpoint of giving an individual that self-awareness space. We focus on being able to share your story. I can't tell you how many times I've heard women when they come to the ministry, can't tell you how many times I've heard them say, I've never really shared my story, you know, especially in a public format. And the reason for this is, number one, it's going to push you out of your comfort zone very quickly. But secondly, that, in my opinion, is where we truly begin the healing journey. When we're able to talk about our story, when we're able to talk about how we felt on that grief journey, that is really, really, really powerful. So it's about knowing your story and how it affects you. It also helps us move towards making peace with our past. It's very difficult. You know, there's a phrase that's been around now for several years, live in the moment. And that was really particularly interesting to me a few years ago. So I actually Googled, how do you live in the moment? And of course, as you can imagine, according to the internet, there are a number of ways that you can live in the moment, and YOLO, you only live once, all that other stuff. There's a number of ways. However, making peace with your past, however you choose to get there, is really, really critical. Paying a particular attention to your relationship patterns is also an important component of self-awareness. Looking at your behaviors and how they have an impact on others. How does your anger perhaps affect other individuals with whom you have a relationship? How do you allow their anger to influence you? Does it make you further angry? Do you try to process through that rationally? All of these things are components of self-awareness. And then lastly, if we think about the grief journey and self-awareness, I looked this up because I found it very fascinating, and I want to read something. It says, grief self-awareness is a person's ability to be purposefully and intentionally paying attention to what's happening in their grief journey, and to accept things as they are, not how they wish they were. And when I read that, that just really hit me. Paying attention to how things are versus how I wish they truly were. I'm sure that if you are on here, maybe you've lost someone, you've lost a mother, you've lost a spouse, a child, a parent, whomever it may be. And it's really easy to get trapped into this cycle of wishing that things were different. So I encourage you to really step back and explore these things that I've mentioned this morning, and focus in specifically on your levels of self-awareness and what does that look like. I hope that you'll join me next Monday, where we'll talk about self-management. So now that you know these things and you've been truly self-aware, how do you go about managing everything that you've learned? So again, I hope you'll join me next week. Until then, I pray you have a safe and blessed 4th of July and a wonderful week. Thank you so much.